See you.
Brian, great to be with you.
First off, on what's going to be happening now on Michigan, there's no doubt about it tomorrow. Are you surprised the uprising against President Biden in Michigan for his support of Israel?
I'm not, but I think what people are missing is the bigger picture are the union workers in Michigan. 600,000 union workers in Michigan that are upset with Joe Biden, looking for a place to land as well.
Because of the electric car movement?
You got it. So it takes 1/3 less workers to build electric cars than it does the internal combustion engine as well. So 200,000 Palestinians there, but the 600,000 plus their spouses, their cousins, everyone's connected to the car industry in Michigan as well. So I'm focused on making sure that the Republicans are pro-union as well.
Right, which is interesting because if you just say the American consumer is going for the electric car, that's the way it is. It's not true. It's the subsidies this administration's providing using taxpayer dollars to shove it down everyone's throats. And for the most part, Americans are giving it the Heisman.
Exactly. So let markets figure this out, not the government. The government's made a horrible choice here. They're $20,000 more on average. The people that are selling them can't get rid of them. The rental cars can't rent them. It's not going to work, at least not yet.
All right, so let's talk about what's happening at the southern border. We heard about the horrific murder of that Georgia college student. Just wanted to go for a jog during the day. And it turns out it's a Venezuelan who came here illegally with a sham marriage, got to New York City, got in trouble already for driving a kid around on a moped without a helmet, divorces his wife or just leaves his wife, goes to Georgia, joins his brother, and sees a woman jogging, kills her.
You got it. This is horrible. A nursing student, my wife a nurse. This lady had a wonderful life in front of her. And joining her today are 300 Americans dying from fentanyl poisoning. I want to point out that this person is one of 200,000 Venezuelans.
Laken Riley.
Laken Riley, God rest her soul and her family. But this Venezuelan is one of 200,000 Venezuelans that Joe Biden has paroled illegally. 200,000 Venezuelans in this country, and now Venezuela thumbing their nose at us and won't take anybody back.
Yeah, they had a special provision in 2022 in September. New parole system. If you're from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, or Nicaragua, you get to stay. Horrible governments. You shouldn't be forced to go back there. How's that working out? And didn't he have a reapproachment with Venezuela to get them to pump their dirty oil because he refused to pump it here? And in return, they give us their criminals.
Yeah, one more example of Joe Biden's incompetence when it comes to foreign policy. He takes the sanctions off of them in hopes of having some type of a legal election process, which still hasn't happened. And in turn, they give us 200,000 of how many of these are criminals, we don't know.
But if you want to know why the price of oil is not going through the roof, he let Iran sell and he let Venezuela pump. And that has a lot to do with all this.
Yeah, and then you add to it that Iran has 500 ghost ships that are smuggling oil from Russia to China and India as well. And here we are today.
So we also have this. Chinese nationals. Through San Diego alone, we have 24,000 Chinese national encounters. You know how many we deported in fiscal year 2023? 288. This is just through San Diego. In the past, it's been a few hundred. What's going on here?
Well, look, I think there's probably at least 40,000 Chinese nationals that we know that have come into the country illegally. What we're going to see is an explosion of human trafficking. Just talking to my people, the boots on the ground back home, the KBI agents, Kansas Bureau of Investigation agents, the ICE agents back home, we're seeing an explosion of human trafficking, and I think we're going to find these Chinese nationals behind it.
So they come in with roller bags. They're not coming through the Darien Gap. They somehow looks like they're getting dropped off in Mexico. Some of them are military-age males. And we used to question them for days as long as it took. Now you're not allowed to ask them certain questions. You've got to pass them through in hours. Why is it to our advantage to pass them through in hours? Why are you curious about why they're here and this administration doesn't seem to be?
Well, this is part of the Chinese story. They're attacking us on the air, land, and sea. They're bringing, we pump in counterfeits through the northern border. They're stealing our intellectual property. They're buying property next to military bases. All those things are happening here. It is a huge concern for Americans. It should be. This is our number one long-term national security threat besides our national debt.
So you don't have the answer to what they're doing here?
Of course not. But we sent letters.
Because we know it's a horrible government. It's a hard place to live.
Yeah, the government has no idea who they are or where they are. In addition to the ones we've known that have come into the country, how many gotaways are there that have not been assessed to see what their background is?
So, there's a story with Peter Schweitzer's book. He's always ahead of the curve. And he talks about the flood of fentanyl is China on every layer. They not only have the precursors to fentanyl, they're packaging it. They have people in places like Michigan and Vermont and New Hampshire who are sending it out. They know it's part of their process, their attempt to kill us.
Right. So these Chinese organized crime make the precursors. They smuggle the precursors into Mexico. They work with the cartel to get them into our country. You're going to see human trafficking springing up next to the drug trafficking. And then on the back end of this, these Chinese nationals are then converting this money to cryptocurrency and then sending it back to China, the CCP intimately entwined in all this process.
So, Senator, do you have an approach besides asking for answers on this? Your Homeland Security Secretary is going to be in front of the Senate. He's going to be impeached, and I guess they're going to go through a formal hearing. Unlikely to get impeached with 60, you need 2/3 of the Senate to do it. Has he provided any answers, even behind closed doors?
No answers. And jumping ahead, Brian, we need a change in the White House. The goals of this White House have never been to secure the border. 10 million people cross the border illegally under Joe Biden. Ultimately, we need somebody different in the White House whose goal is to secure the border.
What's your response to the bipartisan bill that's in the House right now that would talk about a change in asylum laws, bring back return to Mexico, but finance to pure military funding Ukraine and no humanitarian aid and funding for Israel?
I would not negotiate with the White House until we share the same goals. I've never heard Joe Biden say, I want to secure the border. I've never heard Chuck Schumer say, I want to secure the border. What their goals have always been is to get as many people across the border legally or illegally as they can to make them into Democrat voters for the future. So I think regardless of what's in this bill, I would not waste any more time, Republican time, on this until I hear Joe Biden say, I want to secure the border.
All right. He does say that now. He does say they're in a border crisis, but you do believe that Ukraine are the good guys in this, right?
I think that we should secure our border before we talk about funding Ukraine. There's so much more Joe Biden could do right now besides sending more money to Ukraine. We could implement more sanctions, banking sanctions on the energy sector. I mentioned
on what energy sector?
On the Russians selling energy through the banking sector are not being sanctioned right now. So we could sanction all those types of dollars coming through the banking that are energy related and anyone doing business with the Russians. Additionally, Joe Biden shutting down our LNG exports, he artificially increases the price of LNG, which helps Russia as well. I mentioned the ghost ships. There's so many more things we can do than just send more money to Ukraine, which looks to me like a 7 or 10 year battle going nowhere.
Well, I just do think that we have to support them because there's no doubt about it. Russia is on the march. And what do you think China gets from a Russian victory in Ukraine? What do they learn from that?
Well, I think that's just it. You got to go back to the start of this. Remember, this all started because Joe Biden left Afghanistan. He showed weakness. Our enemies no longer respect us, let alone fear us. And certainly, to your point, China is seeing, look, what is the type of response of America? But remember, Brian, we have 100,000 American troops in Europe right now working with NATO, the 1st Infantry Division from Kansas, from Fort Riley's been over there for years as well. I think we've paid our dues. We need Europe to step up. We're starting to see that, but I'll believe it when I truly do see it. I think there's more that the president can do as well besides just sending money.
We'll take a time out. I want to talk about, I'm firmly in support of getting that money. I just think we got to get politics out of this. And President Biden's totally to blame because he has not effectively, he slow walked the weapon systems that if he got everything there right away, we would not have the problems we're having right now. You give these people a fraction of what they need and they fight like lions, and they've taken one from losing 25% of their country to now 15. Now they gave up 3%. Now it's at 18%. If you give them the weapons, they kill Russians.
I think it's a tough situation. I'm not seeing much progress. At least 200,000 people have died in this war so far. Maybe 1 million casualties. I think that we should be focused on.
But it's all because of Russia, though.
It's absolutely Russia's fault.
Nothing with Ukraine.
But it's this is actually, I think it's Joe Biden's fault, and certainly Putin has taken advantage of it.
Right. Who is the bad guy? When we come back, what happened with the IVF story in Alabama? What does it mean now that Democrats say I have another chance to retry Roe v. Wade? Let's talk about that with a guy that used to do this for a living.
There you go.
Dr. Roger Marshall, what did you do for a living before you got into Senate?
Well, so I was an OBGYN and had a very active infertility practice, helped hundreds of women get pregnant, and certainly referred hundreds of women for IVF. Just think about this today, Brian. 200 babies are going to be born in America today because of IVF. Each one a miracle in themselves, celebrating them. Republicans are the party of pro-family. What's more pro-family than helping couples have children? So we need to get behind this. I think the beauty of the Dobbs decision is it puts this issue back into the hands of we the people. And I think that the judicial system, maybe a little bit of overreach in Alabama, but the legislative branch can fix the problem.
So how do you fix it? We want to make sure if people want to do this IVF, they're having trouble getting pregnant, they want to do this thing through the medical profession, they want to do this. They said there's non-viable embryos, they get discarded. So could you explain that to me?
Oh, gosh. Look, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a priest or a rabbi. I am a doctor. I don't have all the answers. And I think that's a big difference between myself and some of the folks on the left is that sometimes there's answers that God hides from us. All I can do is celebrate the miracle of the births of these babies. I think that God has given us this technology. I would encourage people that are worried about the IVF and these embryos that they should talk to their rabbi, to their priest, somebody that's has a better connection than I do with God. I think it's a tough situation, but what I do know is lots of good comes from these IVF babies.
Right. And what do people who say because of this ruling, people are not going to be able to get it? Like, for example, some of these people said now in Alabama, my doctor has said we're not going to go forward until we get clarity because they don't want to be accused of manslaughter.
Right. And I think that's, back to my original point, is that the Dobbs decision puts us back into the hands of the local states. So I think the state legislatures need to write something that gives them protection. Very quickly, yesterday, this needs to be a priority for the Republican legislature in Alabama and get this right. I don't know what that wording looks like, but there's a way to do it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll talk about that and see where it goes. Right now, the President of the United States just won South Carolina. He's on the cusp of winning Michigan. He's set up for winning Super Tuesday. One thing he's not doing is winning independents. Does that worry you? Nikki Haley seems to be.
It is a concern. I've learned not to worry about things, but it's a concern. I think that we have to be, again, this pro-family message, this pro-economy message, safety and security back home, whether you're an independent or a hardcore Republican. I think folks' number one concern is still the safety and their family, the southern border, inflation, the price of gasoline and groceries. I think we have to bring those messages home.
How concerned are you about a government shutdown? You know what the speaker's up against. You know he's got a slight margin. And they've only have 10 of 12 appropriations bills done, which is a lot, but then it's got to reconcile with the Senate.
Right. What your listeners need to understand is that Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer want to leverage the threat of a shutdown so they can write an omnibus, so they can bring all these 12 bills together, and then they can write their legislation, fund their bridges to nowhere.
Disaster for our budget.
What's that?
It's a disaster for our budget.
It is absolutely a disaster for our budget. Again, the Senate Appropriations Committee did their job back at the end of July of last year.
Okay.
And then the Senate has only brought like 2 or 3 of those bills to the floor. There's 12 buckets of funding. We've only brought, I think, 3 of those to the Senate floor. Nothing since October. Again, look at their actions, not the words. The actions of Chuck Schumer is he wants an omnibus. He does not want to fund these one at a time.
And with the House, what recommendation would you have for the House?
Yep.
Find a way to get a CR that brings you what?
You got it. So if we would do the CR, go back to continuing resolution, which takes us back to last year's funding levels and a 1% cut. If that CR, that continuing resolution, is in fact April 30th, then we're forced this 1% cut, $100 billion. It's the lesser of two evils. That would be my recommendation. And jam the Senate with it.
Senator Thune is one of the last leaders to endorse President Trump. Looks like everyone's on board. Is the Republican Party united?
Yeah, I think we are. We have our own opinions. We're not lemmings. We're not going to do everything exactly the same way, but we're united to fight for people, to protect our constitutional rights, to secure our southern border, and have a strong economy.
Senator Roger Marshall, great to see you.